This is Brother Ron, and welcome to We All Be News Radio and TV, the news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Good evening, boys and girls, scholars and laymen, ladies and gentlemen, and all people and walks of life in between and beyond category. This is Brother Ron, also known as R2C2H2 the artivist. Welcome to another wonderful, infotaining, edutaining edition of the Artivist Thinks, Thought Provocateur. And today, topic is maybe forgive, but never forget. Once again, maybe forgive, but never forget. Today, December 8th, 2019, marks the 20th anniversary of the U.S. government being found guilty or complicit in the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Once again, today's date, December 8th, let it live on in infamy, marks the 20th anniversary of the U.S. government being found guilty in a U.S. civil court trial in Memphis, Tennessee, of killing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this something to me is very important. I called December in one of my last show segments the month of martyrs. This is martyr month as far as I'm concerned. You know, a lot of folks are celebrating the so-called birthday of Jesus Christ on Christmas, December 25th. And also I have noted that a lot of our great freedom fighters and lovers of liberty have died in this month as well. December 2nd was the 160th anniversary of the state execution of John Brown. December 4th was the 50th anniversary of the state crucifixion of Fred Hampton Jr. at just 21 years old. And now December 8th marks the state recognition of its part in the assassination, execution, and crucifixion of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So I do this as a service to the people. What's crazy to me is right now I'm not that far away from the crucifixion sites. I'm literally just several hundred feet away from the actual crucifixion site of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as I do this podcast. But I always find my duty. We got to take advantage of this technology. Yes, we got a lot of toys and gadgets and smartphones and all that stuff to play with, but we're not really pushing these tools to its greatest potential. So I'm blessed that I have it on my soul and spirit to share this with you all. And a great read on the Dr. King assassination and the state involvement, the conspiracy behind it all, is this book right here, The Plots to Kill King, by Dr. William Pepper. He was James Earl Ray's lawyer and advocate, and also he was a friend of the King family. He actually knew the actual Dr. King Jr. in life, did some political work, some civil rights work with Dr. King. He showed him the photos from Vietnam of the children who were disfigured and traumatized by the whole war experience. You know, Dr. King came out against the Vietnam War officially April 4th, 1967, up in Riverside Church up in New York City. And then April 4th, 1968, exactly 1 year later, he was assassinated on the hotel balcony at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. Is that a coincidence? To see how it works? So this is a great book to read. This is the third installment of that series. This is a definitive book. I guess it started with and Act to State and Orders to Kill. Those was the first two books in the trilogy. I think Orders to Kill was the first book about the King assassination. Then the Act to State came out with more information. And basically, this book right here is the third installment of the trilogy. And it basically said Dr. King did not necessarily die on the balcony floor of the Lorraine Motel or hotel, whatever you call it, but he maybe actually was killed in his hospital room at St. Joseph's Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, by the chief surgeon. And like I said, Dr. William Pepper was James Earl Ray's lawyer. James Earl Ray's interesting. James Earl Ray never had a trial for his alleged involvement in the King assassination. He I think he pled guilty back in March of '69 and waived his right to a trial. And he was given a sentence of 99 years to life in prison. He actually died on my birthday, April 23rd, 1998. And people say, well, he must have been guilty, but you got to think about it. His lawyer who represented him during that time was Percy Foreman, a well-known lawyer, one of the most successful, well-known defense lawyers in the country, but who was also a mob-connected lawyer out of Texas. You know, Texas where they killed Kennedy in Dallas. So my understanding, Percy Foreman was a mob lawyer, very successful defense lawyer, legendary lawyer. They basically told James Earl Ray to plead guilty. In so many words, he wasn't even trying to give his client a proper defense. He just basically told him he did plead guilty or whatever. I think James Earl Ray was under duress. And you start thinking about James Earl Ray. Who was James Earl Ray? This guy. I mean, how can a guy escape from a state penitentiary in Missouri, be on the run as a fugitive, and then get caught in Heathrow Airport in London uh, after being accused of being Dr. King's alleged assassin? How did he have the resources? A guy who was known not to be the brightest bulb in the box. He was no John Dillinger or anything like that. He'll rob a store and get caught moments later or hours later. So he wasn't like a great criminal mastermind. So how can you convince folks that this guy acted alone? This guy who was known to get caught as soon as he robbed a store, who was escaped, from a state penitentiary or federal penitentiary in Missouri or Misery, as I call it, and got a passport without any type of help or conspiracy being involved. So there's some things you can look at, but that book is a great book to read. And there's a lot of things I want to talk about. I don't want to keep y'all too long. I want to keep this about an hour about my thoughts about today and what went on. It's fascinating. America got this way of exaggerating things, especially when it comes to law and order or law and disorder or just us. For example, they called the O.J. Simpson trial the trial of the century. We had all this media buzz and all this stuff. A lot of people made money off their trial. The O.J. Simpson situation is a money-making venture for the system. Everybody can make money off the so-called murder conspiracy, except for O.J. Simpson himself, who was found not guilty in a court of law 20 plus years ago for the killings of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. But this machine is powerful. This propaganda machine, or Malcolm X said, the media is the most powerful entity on the planet because it influences and controls the minds of the masses. Well, with this King assassination thing, it definitely influences and control the minds of the masses. There was actually a media blackout when the civil trial took place back in 1999. It was basically a month-long trial, and the verdict came out December 8th, 1999, that the U.S. government was complicit in the assassination of Dr. King, and it was not reported nationally. You had international press there, but it was not a lot of national or local interest in the news of the government being found guilty of killing Dr. King. You had a reporter, the only reporter from Memphis, the only journalist from Memphis that attended every day of the trial was a guy named Wendell Stacy, a white man from Arkansas who worked at a news station, ABC 24, I believe. He was an anchorman, and he was the only one that covered the trial from day one to its conclusion. And really, to me, he's a profiles in courage, because he's out there trying to find the truth and get the information out there. his efforts in the King situation, I believe, affected his career later on. I think he lost his job, but they were trying to get rid of him, and he successfully defended his right to keep his job after the King thing. And he died. He had a lot of health problems, had some chronic health problems over the years, and he passed away back, I believe, in August 30th, 2007, in his home. So Wendell Stacy, shout out to that guy for having the courage to cover the trial and report what he saw. And if you think about it, there's a lot of things that you can find online. Like I said, look at this book. I know HBO did a documentary called King in the Wilderness. It's worth checking out because it's his peers, his colleagues, talking about his last years of his life on this planet. Dr. King was just 39 years old when he was assassinated, but the coroner said that he had a heart of a 60-plus-year-old man. At 39, he was under a lot of stress, a lot of trauma for the last 13 years of his life. And the King family has suffered a lot in terms of loss of life, like the Kennedys. The next year, July 21st, 1969, Dr. King's little brother, A.D. King, was found floating in his swimming pool under questionable circumstances. Now, the King family, like I said, A.D. King had heart problems. The King family has a family history of heart conditions. Like A.D. King, one of his daughters died around 19 or 20 years old from a heart condition. He lost a son in the last 10 years who was also a minister from a heart condition. So the King family had a history of heart troubles, I believe. But like his wife said, his widow, A.D. King's widow, she believed the system killed her husband. The system killed her husband as well as her husband's brother, as well as their mother. Alberta King, the matriarch of the King family, Dr. King's mom, A.D. King's mom, she was killed at Ebenezer Church in a church shooting. Her and this deacon named Boykins were killed by a black guy who was an alleged Hebrew Israelite from Ohio named Marcus Wayne Chenault. He came into the church June 30th, 1974, gun ablazing, shot Mother King at the organ, I believe. She was a talented organist and choir director. She had musical gifts, and she was killed at the organ, and he killed the deacon as well, one of the deacons, Deacon Boykins. And no, so there's like, you lose Dr. King in 68, you lose his brother in 69, then you lose Mother King in 74. So there's a lot of things that a lot of us not aware of because we don't do our own research. You wait for your enemy to define your heroes and sheroes, and this is what happens. And also, I mean, this is not common knowledge. A lot of times, even though the stuff is out there, we don't know how to search for information a lot of times. That's why I think it's important that we tell our stories and reclaim the narrative, like I'm doing with We All Be, the info movement, reclaiming the narrative, commemorate things that might not get a lot of mainstream attention, but it should be information that's readily available and accessible to our people, and we need to talk about these things. That's why I'm doing this thing about Dr. King tonight. Dr. King knew that he was a marked man. Make no mistakes about it. He knew he was a marked man. I had a chance to hear Reverend Albert Sampson, who was the housing director for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He also was involved in SNCC, one of the founding members of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He went to Shaw University, where he met Dr. King, I believe, back in the early 60s. He was one of a handful of ministers who were actually ordained by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., so he's part of a very exclusive club. And he said at a speech that he did at the crucifixion site of Dr. King back in the fall of 2015, I recorded this and put it on We All Be TV. I might even include this in this video podcast, that speech he did, the video, where he basically said that Dr. King called a meeting back in the summer of 1966 with his top lieutenants of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And he told them, he said, look, a black FBI agent from California told me that I will be assassinated by the U.S. government. He told them that in that meeting. This is back in the summer of 66. And by the spring of 68, by the spring of 68, Dr. King was dead in Memphis, Tennessee. So I'll include that little bit probably in this video podcast. And so Dr. King knew, like Walter Funtroy, the SCLC secretary and future congressman, who was actually one of the key players in the congressional committee investigation into the assassinations of Dr. King and MLK. He said that when him and Dr. King was watching JFK's funeral procession in D.C., Washington D.C. back in '63, he said that Dr. King said that if they could do that to a president, I won't make it to 40. And Dr. King was dead at 39. You see how that works. And contrary to popular belief and propaganda, Dr. King had no problem with armed black people guarding his life. He had no problem with black men with guns protecting him. He had no problem at all. There was that incident after the Montgomery bus boycott where he was stabbed in the chest by a deranged black woman up in Harlem doing a book signing. And he talked about in his famous last speech, the so-called mountaintop speech, had he sneezed, the thing would have went through his heart and bled him out. He would have bled to death. And he would have missed all these historic accomplishments he did in his lifetime if he had sneezed. So that was part of his last speech, the so-called mountaintop speech. But every time Dr. King would come to Memphis, he would have a all-black Memphis police security detail. Every time, except for the last time, he was not giving the luxury of a black police security detail, which is strange. As a matter of fact, sometimes they have a lot of police surveilling Dr. King whenever he was at a premises, like doing a rally or even his living situation. They have noticeable police presence in the area. But on the day he was killed, the police were scaled back. Allegedly, somebody from Dr. King's circle, some people believe it was Billy Cowles, told the police to scale back several blocks from the Lorraine on the day of the assassination. Now they got the court trial transcript somewhere online of the Dr. King or the civil court trial that happened back in December of '99. You should be able to find that somewhere online. And so Billy Cowles allegedly had a part in the King assassination from several sources. Billy Cowles did that, I believe, Academy Award nominated documentary Witness Room 306. It's called Witness Room 306, and it's basically about Billy Cowles, who died back in I want to say May of 2016. Well, he was part of the SCLC, and Dr. King was supposedly on his way. Him and his entourage was on their way to Billy Cowles' home to eat dinner before they did the rally that night on April 4th. And of course, we know he never made it to the dinner. And Billy Cowles claimed in the documentary that Dr. King, him, and Ralph Abernathy spent a whole hour together in room 306, telling preacher jokes and all this other stuff. Allegedly, his wife wasn't finished with the food, but from my understanding, his wife, who's also deceased, his wife at that time, who predeceased him, Billy Cowles, I believe she claimed that the food was already ready and was getting cold. So I don't know what to believe, but she claimed that the food was already ready. So Bill Cowles claims in the documentary that he spent the last hour of Dr. King's life with Dr. King in the room with him and Ralph Abernathy. Ralph Abernathy wrote a book, the autobiography that came out that was very controversial because he basically exposed Dr. King's infidelities, allegedly. And he was Dr. King's closest friend. Dr. King would call him David because his name was Ralph David Abernathy, but he basically was considered Dr. King's best friend. But he wrote this tell-all book before he died. It's caused a lot of controversy. And he died not too long after that when the book came out. But in his book, allegedly they had an SCLC meeting that last hour of Dr. King's life. And then Dr. King, the guy went in, Ralph Abernathy did his shave thing, put on some aftershave, cologne, whatever. So, according to Ralph Abernathy's book, that didn't happen. So it's like an Irishman situation. Frank Sheeran, is he telling the truth about what happened to Jimmy Hoffa and his relationship with Jimmy. You know what I'm saying? This is what happened. This is why it's so important that we have shows like this to talk about things, offer an alternative perspective on the so-called official story or narrative. So yeah, but Dr. King would normally have an all-black police security detail guarding him, like with the March Against Fear, where James Meredith was shot at and shot by a sniper. Dr. King had armed black men protecting him while he was marching on that highway through Mississippi. These armed black men were known as the Deacons for Defense out of Bogalusa, excuse me, Louisiana. There's a movie out there about the Deacons for Defense. It's Hollywood, but it's a movie nonetheless, starring Forrest Whitaker. It's worth checking out. So, what they said, Dr. King always had armed black security around him. Since that time, he was stabbed by that deranged black woman, Izola Ware Carey, who actually died on the 50th anniversary weekend of the Selma campaign back in 2015. She died. She was about 95 years old. Believed she was staying in a nursing home facility up in Queens, New York, when she passed away. I think her name is Zola Ware Carey. I believe that's her name, something like that. But anyway, same thing with Malcolm X. Where Malcolm X would normally do rallies and speeches at the Audubon Ballroom when he was assassinated, there'll normally be like 3 dozen police officers outside. Their presence was felt when Malcolm would do a rally at the Audubon. But the day he was killed, there were hardly any police around. They didn't come around until after he was assassinated or shot. That's when you saw the police presence. Same with Dr. King. Police didn't come around until he was shot in aftermath. And what's interesting, Dr. King was normally stay at white folks' hotels. He wasn't staying in the Lorraine. He did his community work at the Lorraine. A lot of times, community meetings took place at the Lorraine, but he was staying at a Holiday Inn facility. Holiday Inn was created and founded in Memphis by Clemens Wilson. I want to say back in August, back in the 1950s. But yeah, you can check all this stuff out because, like I said, keep on changing the narrative on the King thing. So James Earl Ray claimed it was a guy named Raoul that was his handler. James Earl Ray, I believe, went up to Canada after he escaped from misery and took somebody else's identity, a guy named Eric Gault that looked like James Earl Ray. They looked similar. The Eric Gault character was a contractor with the government. I guess he worked with the Canadian and U.S. governments, respectively. But Raoul supposed to have been this real person. And I saw a picture or a photo of Raoul in this Assassins documentary about the King assassination. Allegedly, they put him in Raoul. So James O'Reilly claimed Raoul was his handler, the guy who was responsible for the King's death, that he didn't do it himself. And this Raoul guy allegedly was also a part of the Kennedy JFK assassination situation. Allegedly, this Raoul is a gun runner for U.S. military intelligence. But check out this book to find out more information about Raoul and all that other stuff. So you had the Memphis invaders that were present the day Dr. King got killed. The Memphis invaders were Memphis's versions of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. They were the young radicals. Dr. King, he had an interesting relationship with the young black radicals, the black power types like Kwame Ture, or otherwise known as Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown. Dr. King actually respected these guys. He thought they were very intelligent, very articulate. He might not agree with their assessment of utilizing violence and all this other stuff, but he had respect for people like Stokely. And they worked together on a couple of projects. Stokely was the head of SNCC at one time. He kicked all the white folks out of SNCC. He thought it should be a black organization because it was about black power. And the black power concept actually came about during the March Against Fear when Stokely spoke at this park in Greenwood, Mississippi. And Black Power, he spoke the term Black Power in his speech, and it just took out like wildfire, like a wildfire. It just took off. It went viral. There was no internet back then, but it caught on, and Stokely became that guy that white folks love to hate, or fear, or respect, or whatever. it's kind of interesting with the legacy of Stokely or Kwame Ture. So, you know, there's a couple theories about where the shot actually came from. A lot of witnesses that day claim that the shot came from the bush or the brush that was cut down early the next morning. And that's another thing you notice with these big time assassination uh, scenarios, whether it be JFK, MLK, or RFK, and even Malcolm X, the crime scene is always contaminated. Once again, they always contaminate the crime scene. They always compromise the crime scenes with these murders. Like for example, with JFK in the limousine that he was riding in, they immediately, fixed the limousine up as in a museum somewhere in the Midwest, but they basically just took the limousine, got rid of all the evidence, restored the living, they restored it, reupholstered all this stuff. So they got rid of all this key evidence because had they kept the limousine in a certain condition as it was, they could have probably figured out where the rifles, it's like all about ballistics and stuff. So they compromised that. Same thing with Dr. King. When they picked his body up off that bloody hotel balcony, they immediately brought in people to clean up the evidence, to clean up the blood. To sanitize the balcony, which is interesting, crazy. So they cut down the brush. There's people say they saw smoke coming out of. People like Dr. King's driver, Solomon Jones, and also the Black New York Times reporter Earl Caldwell, who was staying on the bottom floor of Lorraine. And also, from my understanding, Dr. King's room was changed from a more secure spot at Lorraine to that open spot on the balcony, room 306, where they could get a clear shot, as Billy Cowles would say in some of his interviews. He got out the way so they could get a clear shot. Man, he might have misspoke, who knows. But with that said, Dr. King was shot in the face, body, whatever. Even though they say he was killed allegedly at the hospital, according to this book, he probably was not going to make it anyway. And if he had made it, he would have been severely he would not be the same orator. He wouldn't be able to probably speak, let alone walk, if he had survived the assassination attempt. It's a lot to take in. And A.D. King was in Memphis too as well. Like I said, A.D. King died crazy the next year under questionable circumstances. He could have had a heart attack, but unlike his widow, the system killed him. All that stress dealing with this stuff, all that aggravation, stress. Dr. King family was under surveillance by the U.S. government for 3 generations at least, starting with his maternal grandfather, Reverend A.D. Williams, who was a prominent minister and community organizer. He was very well respected in the Black Atlanta community. It's a powerful kingmaker because he, helped establish, social empowerment organizations like the NAACP up in Atlanta. He was a country preacher, who was ambitious. And so he grew Ebenezer Church to the powerhouse it was back in the day. And then when he passed away back in the 1930s, Martin Luther King Sr. took over as pastor, Dr. King's father. The rest is history. So I read an article 20 some years ago that said the U.S. government had the King family under surveillance for their civil rights, social justice activities, starting with the maternal grandfather. So you can look that up with a quick Google search. And like I told somebody tonight, with Booker T. Washington, and they never really talk about how he actually died. Nobody really talks about how did he really die. But then what's interesting is to note that his last speech he gave, his last public speech was given at Yale, the home of Skull and Bones, the Illuminati for your body, Illuminati, right? So then, next thing you know, he was dead. But the person who took over at Tuskegee for Booker T. Washington or for the Institute was Robert Moulton. And Robert Moulton was a U.S. Army intelligence spy. It's not nothing I'm making up, but he was a spy. He was a spook for the government. He was the spook that not only sat by the door, but he ran the whole thing, right? And then not too long after that, after he passed, you got the situation with Tuskegee syphilis experiment. So I don't believe that Booker T. Washington would have let that happen, the Tuskegee experiment. I mean, or the syphilis experiment at Tuskegee, if he was still around. So they moved him out the way. So, I mean, you can say, well, brother, how you know all this stuff? I said, you look at all this stuff I'm telling you. Look up all this stuff, Robert Moulton, Tuskegee, all this stuff, right? And it is really interesting because, like, James O. Ray, like I said, he died on my birthday, right? April 23rd, 1998. He had some situation with his kidneys, had some form of liver disease. He needed an organ transplant. And I'm tell you why this has to be a conspiracy. Based on that, he never had his day in court. I guess he waived his right when he pled guilty. Then he recanted and said he was under duress. He was threatening to plead guilty. I tell you, his lawyer was a mob lawyer named Percy Foreman. So, whatever. He was made an offer he couldn't really refuse at that time. So, he died on my birthday, April 23rd. He didn't have to die. I'm going to tell you why. And it's laid out. All this stuff you need to know, plot to kill King. It's laid out in the book. There was money raised privately for him to get an organ transplant. He would have to go to, I believe, Pittsburgh to see a specialist for an organ transplant in this situation because the state of Tennessee didn't have the resources or facilities for that. So you had private donors, private people who was interested in the pursuit of truth and justice, and they wanted to prolong James Earl Ray's life. So they put up the money, and then the government said we can't pay for security, and they offered to pay for security and transport of James Earl Ray to Pittsburgh for this transplant, and the state of Tennessee refused the offer. You had people to come forth with the resources to make this happen to save his life, and basically the state of Tennessee executed. They executed James Earl Ray. They gave him a death sentence, and so he died. But what's interesting? James Lawson, the minister and close friend of Dr. King, who inspired Dr. King to come to Memphis, who has been taking the heart since then. He's still around, still, vibrant, energetic, this inspiring orator. He's still around. He actually, formed a friendship with James Earl Ray. And then 10 years after Dr. King get killed, he's the guy responsible for marrying James Earl Ray and his girlfriend. And I believe they're working on a documentary about James Lawson's lifelong commitment to seeking truth about what happened to Dr. King on April 4th, 1968. Because he felt very responsible for Dr. King's death because he invited him to come to Memphis to stand in solidarity with the striking sanitation workers. And he did twice. The first time, I believe March 28th, he had his last march. He led that turned into chaos because of agent provocateurs. And they tried to discredit Dr. King and said, how can a man who was about nonviolence can't control his rally that ends in violence? And there's also the day that the Memphis Police Department killed a teenager named Larry Payne in the projects under very suspect circumstances. Look up Larry Payne. I actually interviewed his late mom, his brother, and sister about what happened to Larry Payne. I remember his mom, every time we was talking during that interview, she would cry thinking about her son, and she was living in Flint, Michigan. This before they knew about the water contamination situation. So she passed away, I want to believe like 2 years ago up in Flint, Michigan. So all this stuff is available on We All Be TV. And Dr. King vowed that he'd come back. So that was Thursday, March 28th, when his march ended in violence. Then the next Thursday, April 4th, Dr. King was dead. So Dr. King only had a week to live after the march went south. And also, March 28th marked the entry of the military coming into Memphis, Special Forces coming to Memphis March 28th. They leave Memphis April 12th, 1968. And there's a thing called Operation Lantern Spike. Y'all need to look up Operation Lantern Spike. One of the leading pioneers in researching what happened to Dr. King in Memphis is none other than our Baba Dick Gregory, along with Mark Lane. They looked into the situation, found that the government had a thing called Operation Lantern Spike. It was a military operation in Memphis from March 28th to April 12th. 8 days after Dr. King assassinated, they were still here. So, I mean, it was like, tying up loose ends, getting rid of people. A lot of folks have died and disappeared under questionable circumstances related to this King assassination. It's kind of like the JFK assassination. A lot of people end up dying crazy deaths or disappearing. No different with MLK. Oh, Judge Joe Brown. Yeah, I found out about Judge Joe Brown because his involvement with James Earl Ray and also with the gun that allegedly killed King. Judge Joe Brown's a very brilliant man, a guy with some integrity. He had a lot of integrity as a judge. It was about manhood, promoting manhood and protecting womanhood. But he got involved. I guess they thought Judge was gonna go along with the same old song, but he was singing a new tune. And basically, he proved that the rifle that's in possession of the Civil Rights Museum, right across the street from what I'm doing is, that's not the rifle that killed Dr. King. The ballistics does not match that rifle. But what we do know now is that the rifle that killed Dr. King could be traced back to the FBI. Yes, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And we all know that J. Edgar Hoover had no love for Dr. King. No love lost, but according to Dick Gregory, he did have love. He had some love for Dr. King. It was a weird, twisted love. Like he had a man crush on Dr. King or something. And I wish I could have followed up with Dick on that a little bit more to elaborate what he meant, but he passed away now. He's an ancestor now, but Bobby put that in my ear that J. Edgar Hoover did have love for Dr. King, but it was like one of the things, if I can't have you to myself, I'm going to destroy you. So it is what it is. But think about Fred Hampton, who was killed December 4th, 1969. His chief bodyguard was FBI informant William O'Neill, who gave the floor plans to Fred Hampton's West Side apartment to his handler in the FBI. And it was William O'Neill who fixed Fred Hampton's last meal. He put Seconal in his food, some sleeping stuff, to make him drowsy. So basically, the Chicago Police Department murdered Fred Hampton in his sleep. He didn't know what hit him. He was too drowsy to defend himself, to do things that probably could have saved his life. He was too out of it because his chief bodyguard drugged his food. So it is what it is. But this is the FBI fingerprints all over the Fred Hampton thing, as well as Dr. King thing. The FBI is involved. So then you got former FBI agents who have came out since that era to talk about the dirty tricks that they employed with the agency. He had COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, and I believe it still exists to this day because you got social media. All these programs and programming being done on the American people and the American psyche. The CIA was big into providing money for news organizations and cultural organizations. They fund money to help sustain and support cultural movements, like sending jazz bands and artists to countries as ambassadors of America, to spread, a certain idea about liberty and freedom through the arts of jazz. You know what I'm saying? It was great to hear quality jazz music, but it served as a Trojan horse to promote a certain type of American propaganda. It's like you had back in the 30s when you had like people like Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth and all them guys, when white baseball players would go overseas to places like Japan. They were just playing baseball, but you had a catcher who was Yale educated, like a good shepherd that Matt Damon, Robert De Niro's CIA movie. This guy named Mo Berg was a catcher. And he was also he was a spy for America. He was part of we call it the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, which is the grandfather or the forerunner to the Central Intelligence Agency. So this guy was a professional baseball player, but also he was a professional spy. He was over there spying for America on Japan. And you think about, America always trains its terrorists. Like the guy Emerald Yamamoto, who was the mastermind behind Pearl Harbor, he went to Harvard University and also was taught how to fly planes in America. This is during the time where, some state schools, some state colleges did not want black folks to attend their law schools or whatever. Think about Lloyd Gaines at the University of Missouri. He wanted to go to law school there. They wouldn't let him go, but they would pay money out the state's pocket, to send him to a place like University of Michigan to go to law school. Or you have the situation in Tennessee where you had black folks that want to go to University of Tennessee Law School, but instead of them going there, the University of Tennessee Law School and university will pay for them to go to Harvard University to get an education. Kind of crazy stuff they do. But this is a situation where you'll train a Japanese guy. He's a guest of honor of the Navy Department. You send him to Harvard University. You teach him how to fly planes. Then a couple of decades later, or a decade or two later, he's using those planes, all that information you taught him to blow up your military base and your Navy ships and whatnot. See how it works? But anyway, if you look at the famous picture, Dr. King lying out on a balcony floor, just laid out. There's a black guy bent over Dr. King, like he's trying to check for his pulse or whatever. Like he's trying to really be concerned. That guy's name is Morrell McCullough. He was undercover Memphis Police Department officer, intelligence officer, also U.S. military intelligence, and he was the first black commissioned CIA officer. That's Morrell McCullough. So he was there to make sure Dr. King was not going to, make it. He was there to check his pulse. Like the dude Eugene Roberts. He was the chief bodyguard of Malcolm X. Was there when he got assassinated. He was actually an undercover NYPD officer working for the Bossy program, which is another counterintelligence program. But it was, through the, New York Police Department. So, he was trying to give Malcolm, I guess, mouth to mouth resuscitation. This man has holes in his chest, holes in his lungs. How's mouth to mouth resuscitation going to save him when he got his chest blown out? Okay. So he was just there to make sure Malcolm was dead. And I believe he had his gun on his person. Allegedly, Malcolm told people, don't check nobody going to the rally. Well, I think it's weird. And maybe if he had checked people going to the rally, allow his people to check these folks, he might have lived a little bit longer. Who knows? I don't know. It's hard to read these things. But, yeah, Morrell McCullough was there. And I had the chance when I came back from the Selma 50th anniversary weekend. I actually called him. I found his number online. And the best way sometimes to hide is to hide in public. And our people are not really aware. We're not students of history like that. So, I probably say Morrell McCullough, but a lot of y'all don't know who Morrell McCullough is. But I knew who Morrell McCullough was. So I found his number online. And I like to research things. And I found his number with a South Carolina area code. So I called that number. So lady that answered the phone, I said, how you doing? Yeah, may I speak to Morrell McCullough? And she put me on hold. And Morrell McCullough came to the phone, and I verified, confirmed that this was indeed the Morrell McCullough that was in Memphis, Tennessee, April 4th, 1968. He said, yes, this is he. This is me. Then I said, I asked him basically something to the effect, were you CIA when Dr. King thing went down? And he said, well, I got to end this. I don't do interviews, something like that. But I reiterated to make sure that this was the same Morrell McCullough that was there when King got killed. He said, yes. And so we he hangs up the phone. It was like less than a 2-minute conversation. And I remember around the 50th anniversary, his daughter did an op-ed for the Washington Post. And I bet she was saying why she had to leave Memphis, how she thought it was going to be better in terms of race relations and whatnot in Memphis. It didn't turn out that way. She didn't have enough white friends, but she didn't talk about her father's involvement in the King assassination, which is interesting. And I was telling people on my social media, hey, this lady, her father was a spy for the government and an agent provocateur and all this stuff. Allegedly, Morrell McCullough, first black commissioned CIA officer. And he was there when King got shot on the balcony. He's kneeling over King. And he's still around from my understanding. So this is stuff that we don't really talk about. A lot of us don't understand. And I remember people talk about, Jesse Jackson's involvement, Billy Cowell's involvement. The Final Call wrote an article, an expose back in 2003 about Jesse Jackson's and Billy Cowell's alleged involvement in the King assassination. Now, some of the last people that Dr. King spoke to on the planet was Jesse Jackson and his band director of his Operation Breadbasket Band. This very talented saxophonist named Ben Branch, Dr. Ben Branch, who is from Memphis. He went to Douglas High School. I believe his teacher was a guy who was a student at Manassas High School under Jimmy Lunsford. Yes, the great Jimmy Lunsford. But Dr. Ben Branch was the last person Dr. King allegedly spoke to. Dr. King told him basically to play one of his favorite songs, Precious Lord, Take My Hand. And he did that. Or as soon as he did that, he got shot in the face or the neck, whatever you want to call it. He got shot. So, another thing was interesting, like people said, well, is this really a conspiracy? Yeah, because there were hospitals they could have went to besides St. Joseph's that were much closer to Lorraine Motel. I think they bypassed at least 3 hospitals that they could have took Dr. King to. They were closer to Lorraine. Now, the one they took him to was known as St. Joseph's Hospital. It was not known to be too good to black people. A lot of black folks would go there, allegedly, and end up not coming out the same way. They'd be dead. Might go there for a simple cold, come out and they headed for the funeral home. You're not going home, you're heading to the funeral home. So it had that reputation. And it was a sister, a righteous ancestor, very influential community organizer named K.T. Sexton. K.T. Sexton was a black woman. She was a community organizer. She was an agitator for social justice. And I believe she was involved in picketing St. Joseph's for their treatment of black people. And somehow she fainted or passed out. And she begged the people, do not let me get checked into St. Joseph's. I won't make it. Do not let me get checked into St. Joseph's. I won't make it. She got checked into the St. Joseph's and she didn't make it. This is back in 1970, I believe. I want to say April 1970. I'm not. Maybe January 1970, but it happened after the King situation. And she got a community center named after her in North Memphis called K.T. Sexton Community Center. And I'm friends with her daughter, the beautiful Annie Yates, who's close with Carla Thomas, the great Carla Thomas. And how many of us know about K.T. Sexton? A lot of us don't know that name. They just know his name of community center. And that's why it's so important to reclaim the narrative and do these type of shows. It talks about this stuff because a lot of these elders are passing away. This is around the holiday season. A lot of people be dropping dead like flies. So all the information died with them. A lot of times we don't have an interest in knowing that information because we're never exposed to that information. I always tell people knowledge of self is taught at home. You're not gonna learn it at school. If you can't get knowledge of self about who you are, where you came from, and where you heading at home, you might be doomed. So that's why I'm glad I'm able to share what I know using this technology situation, get the word out there. So Dr. King, we talked about his family. He was under surveillance by the government before he was even born, generations before he was born. At least spied on the King family 3 generations. That's something to think about. So I could, so much stuff to talk about, but I would say get that book, The Plot to Kill King. Check it out. I have interviewed a lot of people, like the shots, right? Some people believe the shots came from the brush, not from the building, that flop house. Because the thing about it is, when you go to what is now known as the National Civil Rights Museum, the landscape is pretty much different than how it was over 50 years ago. They actually dropped the flop house, made an addition to what they already had with Lorraine as far as museum space and exhibitions. So the thing about it is they claim that James O'Reilly shot Dr. King from the boarding house or the flop house in the restroom. That he was basically somehow got into the bathtub and was able to situate his rifle on the windowsill and was able to pull out that shot with no problem around 6 p.m. on Thursday, April 4th, 1968. But the thing about it is, there was a large tree blocking that view. It was like, not saying that it could not have been done, but there was a large tree in front of that window that would have made it difficult to get a clear shot off to Dr. King. Not that it could not be done, but it would have been difficult. So, but I said the landscape change. They like, people believe the brush. I believe Solomon Jones, Dr. King driver, Earl Caldwell, the black man who was a New York Times reporter. They saw smoke coming from the brush. Some people even saw a white man running out the brush. You know what I'm saying? But they tore down the brush the next day, the early next morning. The city did that, and the person who controlled the Memphis police and fire department at the time was a guy named Frank Holloman. Frank Holloman controlled the Memphis police and fire department. And what the thing about it was, Frank Holloman was J. Edgar Hoover's one of his top goons at the FBI. He was one of J. Edgar Hoover's top goons. I believe he was the FBI man for about 25 years. So that's another FBI connection. Like I said, the gun could be traced back to the FBI. Then you got a G-man, an FBI man patrolling the police and fire departments in Memphis. Then, like people like Judge Joe Brown said that the shot came from the firehouse. You had I believe 2 black firefighters stationed at the firehouse. They were told to leave or go to another fire station. You also had a black man that I interviewed back in 2008. That interview was available at WLB TV. His name is Ed Reddit, Officer Ed Reddit. He was a black man, a proud Manassas High graduate. He was doing surveillance on the Lorraine Motel when he was called away from his duties, allegedly by Frank Holloman and his handler, to say that there was a contract on his life, supposedly. There supposed to be a contract on his life, which is kind of interesting, and that he had to leave the premises and go home. And they forced him to leave, and he went home. And on his way home, and when he got home, that's how he heard about the King assassination. And he testified before Congress about that whole thing. It didn't sit right with his soul or his spirit either. And also, Walter Bailey, the guy who owned the hotel, his wife was a phone operator at the hotel as well. As soon as she saw Dr. King lying flat out on the balcony floor, she had a heart attack and died several days later at the same hospital where Dr. King was pronounced dead, St. Joseph's. Now, I mentioned the Memphis invaders. They were staying at the Lorraine until that last hour or two they were forced to leave the premises. Although Dr. King's SCLC allegedly paid for their room, they were forced to leave the premises in the middle of the day, which is strange. And they believe in protection, self-defense. They carry guns. So imagine if they were allowed to stay on the premises. They could have possibly shot back at the person or persons who shot at King. So they had to go. Allegedly, they were told, I believe the invaders were told that they were told to leave on orders of Jesse Jackson. I don't know how true it is, but getting back to Jesse Jackson, that's an interesting thing, because I mentioned the 2003 Final Call article that talks about Jesse Jackson and Billy Cowles, the local minister here with Chicago connections, being part of the King assassination conspiracy. In 2003, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference had their national convention here in Memphis, Tennessee. I wish I was more aware back then of those type of things going on, but I missed out. I was in Memphis around that time, I believe. And the King family, this is 3 years before Coretta died. The King family came to Memphis along with Dick Gregory and the great ancestor and researcher extraordinaire Steve Coakley. They did a presentation about the King assassination, from my understanding. This is like after the 99 civil court trial decision that tells us for posterity that the U.S. government killed Dr. King. So I think the Final Call actually did a retraction of that story. but it's still around somewhere. If you can find it, save it for your documents for your archives. It's worth reading. And basically, it says that Dr. King didn't really like Jesse or couldn't trust Jesse. He allegedly thought of Jesse Jackson as being just an opportunist, whatever. No, you got to think about it. Jesse was just 26 years old at the time. And also, in this book, Jesse Jackson's alleged involvement in the King assassination also talked, but you also got to go with Reverend Albert Sampson, what he said. And I recorded that. I'm going to put it with this video. That King knew he was a dead man walking. But the thing was, they thought that he was going to be assassinated in D.C. and not in Memphis for sanitation workers. The government could not risk Dr. King leading a poor people's campaign into D.C. It would have shut down the government. It would have become a revolution because 5 years earlier was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. That was not a revolutionary thing. That was more like a parade or a picnic or a gathering that was controlled by the Kennedy administration. It was under control by the Kennedy administration. Malcolm X talks about this in a message to the grassroots about how what he called the farce on Washington was really controlled by white liberals via the Kennedy administration. You know, they get to decide who would speak that day, how long they would speak, and who else was on the program, and when they would leave town. So really, the Big Six was the name of the black leadership, the so-called black leadership or so-called Negro leadership. They were not really in control because they didn't control the purse strings. They didn't write the checks that didn't mount. So coming back from 63 to 68 is a different climate, whereas Dr. King was a media darling. Around 63, you know, he won the Nobel Peace Prize, 64. He became a pariah. He was a person that the media thought was being too uppity. They should stay out of foreign relations affairs and public policy and stick to integrating restaurants and all that stuff. And that, you know, King suffered a lot. He was always, you know, he was greatly depressed. You know, there's a lot of things going on in his life, man, at that time. But he was not the media darling at the end. A lot of the media establishment saw him as a traitor to America. You gotta understand that the CIA controlled a lot of these media outlets. I mean, places like the Washington Post, Naval Intelligence, all this stuff. The CIA's put a lot of money in control of the media. Look up Operation Mockingbird to understand the CIA influence and control over the media. Not just news, but also Hollywood, movies, all types of Department of Defense, Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon. A lot of them put money into these entertainment and cultural apparatuses. It's because all about propaganda. It's all about controlling the narrative and all that stuff. So they control the narrative on King, where he was one of the most hated men in America when he died, but now he's one of our most celebrated. Actually has a federal holiday in his honor. But because the government knew they killed him, they had to do something. They killed the man. It's been proven in the court of law that he was killed by the government. And he knew that he was a dead man walking because the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet was and is his own government. You see how it works? So, yeah, I hope this is helping you all. But I think it's important because this is not going to be talked about. And it's interesting when you figure how things are. You read all these books, people think they know. And James already did all this. You know what's interesting too? I talked about Raul. When this Raul character allegedly got connections to both the JFK and MLK assassination, but also you had a situation where James Earl Ray and Lee Harvey Oswald, they both went to New Orleans before the big events. What I mean by big events, I'm talking about the assassinations of JFK and Dr. King. Both of these figures went to New Orleans before that happened. And New Orleans, people don't understand, New Orleans is an interesting place. It's a distribution hub, you know, the port of New Orleans, but also it's the home to the oldest mafia family in America. And during that time period, there was a guy named Carlos Marcello, or Marcello, whatever y'all, as Carlos Marcello. He was a short white guy, Italian guy who was born in Tunisia, in North Africa. Never gained citizenship, but he was one of the most powerful crime bosses in America at that time. He basically ran the South, right? And so in the civil trial, The King family sued this guy named Lloyd Jowers. Lloyd Jowers owned this restaurant called Jim's Grill near Lorraine. Lloyd Jowers allegedly said he was the middleman for connecting the organized crime folks with the actual assassins for it to happen. He was the middleman. So it's like basically almost like a deathbed confession. The King family only sued him for $1 because they wanted just the truth to come out and be recorded and documented for posterity. Because even the King family did not believe that James Earl Ray actually did it, and if he did do it, he did not act alone. That it was a conspiracy. So it was a produce guy named Frank Liberto who lived in Memphis. He was connected to Carlos Marcello, part of that New Orleans mafia. And Carlos Marcello was a part, he was a crime boss along with Santo Trafficante out of Florida. They allegedly did some contract work for the CIA. The CIA used to hire out the mafia to do contract work, like to put out hits on Castro and other figures around the country and even the world. So, they was going to testify back in the 70s. Around the time Jimmy Hoffa disappeared in July 30th, 1975, you had folks like Sam Giancana and Johnny Roselli from the Chicago Mafia who were involved in doing contract work with the government via the CIA. They were supposed to testify in Congress. They ended up getting killed. Sam Giancana got killed in the basement of his home in Oak Park, Illinois, a suburb outside Chicago. Got shot several times in the face while he was cooking sausages. You got Johnny Roselli was killed in Florida, put his body into we call it a drum, a 55-gallon drum or something like that, and he was floated in the damn ocean. So they found his decomposing, chopped up body in a drum. And man, allegedly, according to Sam Giancana's driver, Sam Giancana and Johnny Roselli were actually approached by the government to kill Dr. King. They were offered $1 million to kill Dr. King, and Sam Giancana and Johnny Roselli would not touch that. Said, no, we're not going to touch that. So it makes you wonder, did they really kill Kennedy? The mafia? And I got to let y'all understand, the mafia is not bigger than the U.S. government. The U.S. government is the real mob. The mafia is not bigger than the CIA. Y'all keep on thinking the mafia run everything. The mafia, prohibition allowed the mafia to get organized. See, but those are the people that's in place controlling public policy. They allow them to grow and thrive, to create that black market. So like, that was the fear. They want, the powers that be did not want Dr. King to get into position to affect public policy. He had too much of an influence, and so he had to go. He could not be compromised. Could not buy Dr. King off with money. It's like him and Malcolm. They were rare because they had integrity. They would not sell out the people for money. They didn't do this for money. They were doing it to try to empower and liberate their people. And another fear with Dr. King, towards the end, he realized, I feel like we integrated into a burning house. Then let us be firemen. We lost our moral way. Morality is not a society thing. It's a personal, individual thing. We also have our own moral codes. So we feel like we lost our way because we confuse as a people integration with assimilation. Integration does not mean you lose your identity and lose your ways. It means they have access to things at an equal level with other parties. Assimilation means you want to be like them, that you willing to give up all of your unique identity and cultural features and other things that make you distinctly you. Before we get ready to get out of here, let me add a couple more things. According to the book, The Plot to Kill King, the people who killed King were a part of the Memphis Police Department, allegedly. The shooter was a guy named Frank Strasser, and his spotter was Lieutenant Earl Clark, according to Dr. William Pepper in his book, The Plot to Kill King. And I believe that in his book also, The Plot to Kill King, that Dr. William Pepper allegedly interviewed Frank Strasser later on in life, within the last 10 years. I think at that time he was driving taxi cabs, kind of like an Uber, Lyft type of thing, I guess. He just was a plain old taxi cab driver. The alleged shooter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., guy named Frank Strasser, and his spot person allegedly was Lieutenant Earl Clark. both members of the Memphis Police Department. And also, the key witness for the state was a drunk guy, a drunkard, an alcoholic named Charles Stevens, who was so drunk on the day of April the 4th that he could not get out of his bed or whatever. He was just so drunk they couldn't wake him up properly. Because I believe a taxi cab driver was sent for him at the flop house. But his wife, Gracie Stevens, she was sick in bed, and she claimed, that she could not identify a man that looked like James Earl Jones. I mean, not James Earl Jones. I'm thinking about James Earl Ray in the facility. Like, even when she was under scrutiny from the law officials, she refused or she could not identify anybody that resembled James Earl Ray on the premises. So she actually paid a price for standing on her truth. They actually, I believe, put her in a mental institution for a minute or so. And but her husband was the key witness for the state, who was an alcoholic who was passed out. So how could he identify James Earl Ray when he was drunk and passed out at the time of the assassination? But this is a guy they use as the key witness for the state. I'm trying to get y'all to understand. So when people try to say, well, it was a civil court trial ruling, is it legitimate? Well, OJ was found innocent, and then he was found guilty of being, guilty party of the deaths of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson in a civil trial. The Goldmans was awarded or rewarded, whatever you call it. But and Bill Cosby, look at the kangaroo court that was the Bill Cosby trial, and he's in jail under questionable circumstances, very unethical conduct by the court. So they were found guilty. And I think what the King were doing also, it wasn't $1 they were suing Lloyd Jowers for, excuse me, I believe it was $100. The King family was suing Lloyd Jowers for $100 in the civil court trial that found the government guilty or complicit in the assassination in the cold-blooded murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And the reason why they did that was so that the truth could come out about the stuff behind the scenes that led to that unfortunate day, April 4th, 1968. They wanted to create a paper trail for the public memory, for the public record, so you could access this information. There's nothing what Dr. William Pepper did. He make a lot of powerful accusations in this book for a conspiracy. And I haven't heard any major lawsuits from anybody, from any entity, or any person he named in this book. So evidently there must be something true to what he's saying in his book, The Plot to Kill King. Read it. Study groups around this. But the ancestor, the righteous ancestors, Dick Gregory, Baba Dick Gregory, and Mark Lane were pioneers in the research for what happened to Baba Dick Gregory's dear friend, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So shout outs to Baba Dick. His legacy lives forever and ever. And I just want the people to, hey, figure this stuff out. Don't take my word for it. Take a look. It's all online and still in books. I'll try to help y'all form an opinion, because it is my hope that people would start taking this information seriously and don't take it for granted. Because I know there's a lot of distractions out here in this world, and so many things, so many demands made on people's time and resources and persons. But you're here for a reason. And it reminds me of a quote. Dr. King, I wrote it down. This quote I found out, the Dr. King legend said, if you're really going to be free, you have to overcome the love of wealth and the fear of death. If you're really going to be free, you have to overcome the love of wealth and the fear of death. To let that sink in. Dr. King was just 39 years old, was a young family man, little kids, beautiful wife who had to raise those kids by herself. I mean, she had village support for sure. But you think about, when people talk about how the King family be acting, how the siblings be fighting among each other, they never had a chance to have a so-called normal childhood. So yeah, you're gonna be very dysfunctional growing up in a family that's been under government surveillance for 3 decades. You see loved ones die crazy, mysterious ways. You see the grief of the mom. Coretta died of cancer complications. I think they say cervical cancer in some sources. I thought it was lung cancer. I think it was cervical cancer. She died in Mexico for treatment, and I believe the grief killed her. Just dealing with the loss of her husband and the sacrifices she made for the movement. And she dealing with grief because your emotional state can cause sickness as well. A lot of people don't know that. Like Christopher Reeve's wife, a widow, she died of lung cancer. And people said, well, why she died of lung cancer? She wasn't known as to being a cigarette smoker or smoker. She didn't smoke cigarettes or anything. But grief can cause lung cancer. A lot of your emotional state can cause real sickness. So be kind to yourself, be patient, be loving towards yourself, but also understand. And when y'all see the King family not getting along in public, it's so much stuff they had to go through with their family. Think about it. You got people in your inner circle, for example. People talk about Ernest Withers, the famed civil rights photographer, being an FBI informant. We had a lot of informants in the black community. Y'all could check out that Malcolm X tape recording he had a conversation with the FBI, visited his home. Malcolm started recording these conversations with the FBI, who would come to visit his home to try to get him to turn and betray Elijah Muhammad and other black leaders and organizations, and he refused to do it. So, this is not unusual for the government to send their G-men, their goons to visit people in the movement. But some people really betrayed the trust of the people in the movement. Like they knew a lot of times that they were being wiretapped and all this stuff. It came with the territory. But the thing about it is you got to keep it moving, keep it going. And it was a guy at the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, who was also a paid informant for the FBI. His name was James A. Harrison. He was, he had a very important position in the SCLC. I remember when I talked to the great Reverend C.T. Vivian about Ernest Withers, the famed civil rights photographer who was allegedly an FBI informant. To him, he wasn't upset about Ernest Withers because Ernest Withers had a large family. He was a freelance photographer. He did a lot more good than harm for the movement because he publicized what they were actually going through. He took a lot of iconic photographs of Dr. King and other people and events of the movement. He actually was a photographer at the Emmett Till murder trial down in Mississippi. He was brave to go down there to take those photos of the people in that courthouse. He's a pioneer. Don't take that away from him. But he said, when I asked him about the other cat, the James Harrison guy, he didn't call him out by name, but his emotional state, he got angry because he felt like it was really like a real betrayal where they had took this guy in, gave him health care benefits, gave him a salary. Yeah, he betrayed the trust of the organization. Because no, Dr. King was the glue that held everything together. And once he was removed, everybody just went their own way. Because Dr. King was the person kind of like had an uncle Arthur. He passed away at 40 from complications from AIDS and HIV. But he was the type of dude that he made sure that everybody ate together on Sundays. He like Soul Food, the movie. We all came with my aunts and my mom's house. We all got together as a family to eat, the fellowship, to break bread. But once he died, he was the glue that brought everybody together, that held everything together. And then we all started just doing our own thing for the most part. Life goes on. But Dr. King was like one of those special people who could bring all types of interesting people together. Like he had a lot of love for the Stokely Carmichaels and the H. Rap Browns and the Fred Hamptons. He had a lot of love for everybody. And you could look at some of the footage. And a lot of times, people thought he was soft. I don't think he was soft at all. I just think that he was sincere about his cause. People say, well, he's a product. Yeah, he's an upper middle class black dude. He was an alpha. Yeah, he's a product of the black elite, so-called, what y'all call the boule advisors to the king. But he had a change of heart. He was about to turn that corner. Before he could turn that corner, they shot him in his face. He was identifying with the young people's frustrations with the system. I gotta understand, Dr. King was bringing poor people to D.C. It was not for a rally. It was for a change of business. It was not going to be business as usual. It was going to shut down the government. So they had to kill him in Memphis. They could not allow Dr. King to bring, because it was about Dr. King. The threat was he bring all those people together. Think about all the poor people, poor white folks from the Appalachian Mountains, the Native Americans on the so-called Native Americans on the Indian reservation, the Chicanos, all the Latinos, brown, yellow, polka dot, whatever. This is echoing back to the 30s. See, I don't know why people don't really get hip to what happened in the 1930s with the union organizing, people going to the streets. You had the Share the Wealth program of Senator Huey Long from Louisiana, Father Coughlin. You had people getting riled up and ready to go, and it was about to hit the fan, and then World War II happened. See, all this stuff is not by accident. The way we got out of the Great Depression was because of World War II, and we've been in a wartime economy ever since. Think about the last time the United States was not involved in some type of military conflict. We've been in a wartime economy since World War II. So war is about profit, and Dr. King was attacking the three evils, right? Racism, poverty, and militarism. Those were the three evils of this so-called decadent, capitalistic, free market society: racism, poverty, and militarism. So Dr. King was killed once he started making this pretty, flowery speeches. He stopped being concerned about riding in the back or the front of the bus. Really, uh, I'm not going to even extend that. The Montgomery bus boycott should be studied better and understand better about us as a people. There's a blueprint there. And also, there was a missed opportunity that Dr. King recognized later on, because listen to his last speech. He's talking about economic empowerment and a certain form of black nationalism and solidarity in this so-called mountaintop speech. And who named these speeches? I Have a Dream. I Have a Dream. We're talking about a bounce check, a nightmare. He had a nightmare. It wasn't about no dream. Listen to the words in that speech. The mountaintop speech was talking about black folks getting some freedom, some land, some businesses. Kind of you got to listen to Malcolm X Prospects for Freedom speech. A lot of revolutions based around securing resources and land. It's about profit. So we are in a war. Black folks have been in a constant state of warfare since we've been here. Before they've been here, Malcolm X told y'all we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. That means we was already here. Columbus knew we was already here. A lot of us forgot that we knew. So what I'm saying is America does owe us reparations for what we lost. When we try to organize, I went to an event on Sunday, and they were talking about the power of the vote. But I'm saying y'all don't even understand. Y'all talking about voting. We've been trying to organize. They told us to get y'all stuff together. We had our Black Wall Streets they destroyed. They destroyed our leaders. They killed our leaders before they reached their prime. I mean, think about if George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or John Adams and Benjamin Franklin were taken out before they reached 40 or 50 or whatever. How would they look? How would the system look today? Alexander Hamilton, if he can get a chance to put his little banking thing and all this stuff together, how would all this stuff look today? Now, that's what our nightmare is. As Black people, we are not allowed to mature, to grow, to see certain things. Yes, you got free will to a certain degree. You got all this stuff going on, but we don't even understand our history. Like we always see, we telling people the wrong thing. We keep on telling them we should forgive and forget, forgive and forget. Maybe forgive, but never forget. Maybe forgive, but never forget. Maybe forgive, but never forget. That's what we got to start telling people, because we start saying, because we speaking upon these generational curses where you telling people, just forget about it and forgive. Then he said, why they keep on doing this to us? Like y'all keep on saying like here, oh, why the stuff that Malcolm said 50 years ago or 55 or 60 years ago still relevant today? Why the stuff that Dr. King said 55, 50 years ago still relevant today? Because we keep on forgiving and forgetting and not understanding the lesson. So you're going to keep on repeating this Groundhog's Day of reality. Like that movie Groundhog's Day with Bill Murray, where he kept on repeating the same day over and over until he got what he needed to get right. Until we start understanding that we're always going to be going in circles like a hamster on a hamster wheel, not going anywhere anytime fast. You know, That's why I do what I do with We All Be TV and other things we do with the We All Be Group Incorporated. I want to empower people. It'd be nice to work with folks that really serious about doing the work. Once I do what I got to do and check out of here, I'm not responsible anymore for trying to maintain a certain level. Because it takes a village. It takes us. It's a marathon. It's a relay team. I need a relay team. It's a marathon. And as I get seasoned and move forward in my journey, I hope I can meet like-minded individuals to form these tribes and to get these things done. Uh, so that's very important. So yeah, keep on. I'm not getting paid for this endorsement at all. Get this book. Keep an open mind. And nothing about Memphis. Yeah, they said no in this book. He also said the Dixie Mafia had a part in all this. See, Memphis is a hub, like New Orleans. It's a distribution hub of the country. But also, if you ever saw the movie The Firm with Tom Cruise, Memphis is an organized crime town. Memphis is right on a river town. It's a distribution hub, so everything come through here. Teamster stuff, but also Chicago, New Orleans. These are mafia town, mob town. And Memphis is in the middle of all. Memphis is in the middle of all that. So look at the movie The Firm to understand what I'm talking about. But that's why it was a perfect place to kill Dr. King, because the way Memphis ran. Memphis is an interesting place, and so you got to think about the savior of Memphis was a guy named Robert Church Sr., who was a mulatto. His father was a white man from Mississippi, from Holly Springs. His mom was his slave mistress. And Robert Church became one, they say he was the first black millionaire of the South. He identified as a black man. He survived the 1866 Memphis race massacre when white folks, it was started by white police officers. When white folks came into the saloon on Beale Street, or near Beale, and shot him in his face, and he survived, and he testified before Congress about what happened. And that led directly to the Reconstruction the Memphis race massacre led to Congress creating what is now known in history as the Reconstruction era. So Robert Church made his money how? It's hard out here for a pimp. He hustle and floated. He owned places of prostitution. He had white prostitutes giving him that money, paying that rent. So he made his money off of prostitution, among other things. He also was a philanthropist, and he was a tough guy. So that's Memphis. You know, it's a grind city. It's a hustle city. And something about Memphis is interesting. A lot of people don't know Dr. King's favorite singer. When people think about who's Dr. King's favorite singer, they think of Mahalia Jackson, which may be so, but excuse me. But his favorite male singer, as far as I know, is a guy named J. Robert Bradley, who was from Memphis, who was discovered by Lucy Campbell, who was the mother of gospel music as we know it. She was the mentor to not only Mahalia Jackson, but also Marian Anderson when she was the music director of the National Baptist Convention for many years. She actually helped debut Marian Anderson at the convention. So also she's discovered, and she was a teacher for a number of years at Booker T. Washington High School in Memphis, which is first black high school for black kids in Memphis. And ironically, did y'all know that Dr. King went to Booker T. Washington High School in Atlanta, which was the first black high school for black kids in Atlanta. So it's kind of interesting connections. But J. Robert Bradley, she discovered him, and that was Dr. King's favorite singer. And he really was. I mean, Dr. King, like I said, he has a unique connection with the Memphis that goes beyond this sanitation worker strike. I think he saw something in Memphis that a lot of Memphians don't see. And that's why he was willing to, go out his way to interrupt his plans for the Poor People March to come to Memphis. He saw something a lot of us don't understand. Memphis has this incredible brand recognition that a lot of Memphians don't know about because we lack knowledge of self. And you look at all this poison, these toxins in the media, how they portray Memphis. Like, if I believe all the stuff that the media says about Memphis, I'll be afraid to leave my apartment. I'll be afraid to live. But like Dr. King said, if you want to be free, if you're going to be free, you have to let go of your love of wealth and the fear of death. Okay? So I hope that's enough for this. Thank you so much for your time and patience. So I think I said enough. It's been about an hour. Thank you all for listening. In the words of the great Duke Ellington, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing, but also feel free to support the artist. If you like the words from Brother Hurd, subscribe to the channel, and spread the word. You can support us. Pay, excuse me. You can support us PayPal, Google Pay, R2C2HU at gmail.com, Cash Apps, $ R2C2H2. You can buy Artivist art at R2C2H2.com. You can wear Artivist art. I got my King shirt on, representing King. We Kings, man. We Kings. Go our Teespring page. The shelf is below the video description. You can access our Teespring page from there. Also, yeah, I'm just thankful that I'm able to serve. I know a lot of y'all are here for Dick Gregory's and Judge Joe Brown's and Dr. Randy Short thing, but also I like to share something with y'all whenever I can. I want to thank everybody who have been fans, who've been consistent in giving and supporting this work, my God work. Thank all the people who have donated, who have brought things to help support the movie. I don't know, man. Help me pay some bills, help keep the lights on, help put gas in my car. And so when you see stuff that I'm doing and that that you enjoy and it's making a difference, it's because of viewers like you that I can do the things I do. I appreciate y'all for helping me with this message. Because so many times I want to give up, then people reach out to me via text or voicemail. I get a chance to talk to them on the phone, and they tell me, Ron, this is really helping me understand me better, help me develop my own worldview. It's very encouraging to see you doing what you're doing because it gives me inspiration to do what I need to do. And so I'm glad that people are really taking hold. And also, before I get out of here, I want to thank Sister Loretta McNary, this beautiful sister in Memphis, Tennessee, this media personality. She thought enough of what I've been doing over the years to give me a Kindle Award. And this means a lot because I don't do it for the awards. I'm so used to giving other people props. I don't really think about when I'm doing something I should get recognized for it. It just comes second nature to me, and I really do want to love and share what I know with the people. I love my people. I try to share what I can with my people. Sometimes I be in my moods like everybody else. There's a lot of things going on. I don't want to talk about everything that's going on, but this really made my year to receive something like this. She thought enough of me and my mom and the community work we're doing. Because I'm not just running my mouth on YouTube and whatnot. I'm actually putting in work. And a lot of times I don't really promote the work like I should. I don't amplify like I need to. But people still watching and people still benefiting from the things we're doing. So I want to thank her for this wonderful Kindle Award. Uh, for it says your service makes a difference. And I hope that the people who are listening to the words that coming out of my mouth, that you agree with this, that my service does make a difference, that you have not wasted your time listening to me talk about the King assassination and other things and bring all this good information. So just thank everybody. This is wonderful. Something I'm going to cherish because I'm in Memphis. And Memphis, sometimes our people don't really, strangers always, or a prophet is always without honor in their hometown among family and friends. If you truly great at what you do, you should find ways to sustain yourself without trying to get validation from other people. You should validate yourself by just being yourself, by loving yourself, and keep on pushing and producing. That's my message to everybody. Because I don't do it for awards and all this stuff. I've been doing what I've been doing as far as I've been doing it, the way I'm doing it for 20 plus years. Never made a lot of money doing what I'm doing, but I have a passion for learning and for sharing knowledge and for wanting to see people to be the best versions of themselves, to love themselves enough to do right by themselves, to honor yourself by doing the things you was meant to do in this life, because we should have all be willing at all times to practice the religion of believing in oneself. And like Dr. King said, he said that human salvation lies in the hands of the creatively maladjusted. I am proudly, creatively adjusted, excuse me, because to do the work I'm doing in a system like this is considered insane. It doesn't make any sense to folks. How can you do this and you're not making this type of money, you're not doing this, why are you doing it? Why not do it? Because if I thought like everybody else, I'll be very, very depressed right now. I got to think a different way. I got to be me. And by me being me, the universal God is allowing me to leave a authentic contribution to the world. By me being me, I am allowed to leave an authentic contribution to the world. People will, like it's like what Dick said. He said, Ron, sometimes when the universal God use you, the universal God don't leave any fingerprints. But then I remind myself, well, that may be true, but the universal God always leaves the evidence. You see how it works? Somewhere. So thank y'all for listening to me. Check out the book, The Plot to Kill King. We gotta tell the truth. The ancestors, if we don't tell their stories, the ancestors get no glory. We gotta let the future generations unborn know the truth. And the people living right now need to know the truth. Your children need to know the truth, and you need to know the truth. You need to learn how to handle the truth, and don't let the truth be used against you. But allow the truth to use you to grow into something greater, and know that the best is yet to come. Once again, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing. Peace.
August of 1966, he calls all of us together from all over the country as one of the largest staff meetings in the history of SCLC. And in the room, he makes the announcement that a black FBI agent out of California that he met with told him that the United States government was going to assassinate him. So he knew in August of 1966 that the United States government was going to assassinate him. He turned to Ralph Abernathy and said to Ralph, "You've been with me for 15 years. Every time my house got bombed, they bombed yours. They bombed your home. Every time we went to jail, you were with me." He said, "And I want you to take over this organization and be the president of the organization." And the gentleman next to me is Cirillo Maxwine from Panama. He said, "Cirillo, I want you to be the treasurer if anything happens to me." And Cirillo was on the $1 million round table for the New York Life Insurance Company. And he said, "You're a man of integrity. I know you're from Panama, but you're in the struggle with us. And I want you to be the treasurer." That was August of 1966. 1968, Martin developed the Poor People's Campaign. That's why you see George Wiley down the end, Johnny Tillman from California, where they created the National Welfare Rights Organization. And those sisters came to Dr. King and said, "We want you to make on your program, we want to be built in to the Poor People's Campaign." Dr. King said, "No problem." Well, that's August of '68. I'm with Dr. King in Newark, New Jersey. He meets with Imam Baraka, Leroy Jones, for those of you who remember. Yeah. He just died 2 years ago, and I flew to Newark, New Jersey to be in his homegoing ceremony. His son is now the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. I got to Newark because I was Martin King's project director for the Carl Stokes campaign. Carl Stokes was the first black mayor of a major city, and then there was Hatch and Garrett, and then he promised Imam Baraka that they were going to come back after the Poor People's Campaign, and we were going to bring Ken Gibson into being the third black mayor. Let me hurry on. And here's what happened. When Martin King came to Cleveland, to Newark, New Jersey, people stayed till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. We had 10 or 15 churches waiting on meeting Dr. King for the Poor People's Campaign. We hugged. He went into the car after meeting with Imam Baraka. Drove through the Harlan Tunnel to meet with Harry Belafonte. 48 hours later, we got the telephone call that they had assassinated Martin Luther King. We knew we were going to die. We thought it was going to be in Washington, D.C., right, and not here in Memphis, Tennessee.
Hey everybody, this is Brother Ron. I am asking you all to do me a big favor. Think about supporting the We All Be movement. Your donation is tax deductible. The We All Be Group Incorporated is a recognized 501c3. And I'm just asking you all because I want to keep on bringing y'all quality work through the way that I know how to do best. And I'm going to sing my praises and toot my horn. A lot of y'all were not hip to Dick Gregory until Brother Ron brought him on the We All Be platform, until that jingle review we did. Y'all seen another side of Judge Joe Brown, and Judge Joe Brown's message has been amplified. But it was We All Be that brought Judge Joe Brown to y'all back in 2014. And so many others. And we covered so many things. So help us out so we can help you all. Peace.